Hey there, today I want to talk about the anatomy of an argument, okay? So I want to deconstruct what it looks like to be in a verbal argument. When somebody's pushing you to argue with them, I want you to understand every single aspect of it so you can decide which direction you want to take and you can understand what they're getting from it and what happens when you get triggered and you react. Why do we react? Why do we react when somebody calls us something or calls us a name or says something about us? Why do we react? Well, we react because we're triggered, right? We're triggered by what they're saying because we take it highly personal, okay? And we take this highly personal because whatever they're saying to us is something that's been in our mind. It's been in our brains. It's something we've been thinking about, okay? And I want to give you an example. An example of a good trigger would be, let's say you lost your job. And you've been trying to get a new job for several months, right? And so it's constantly on your mind. You're like, gosh, I wish I was employed. I'm really working hard. I'm putting my application in. I wish somebody would hire me. You know, and that's what you're constantly thinking. And the next thing you know, you go home to see your family. And right when you get in the door and you close the door behind your mom, so when are you ever going to get a job? I mean, are you going to get a job? Or have you even applied yourself? And you're thinking, and it just rolls all over you, right? That anger, that stress level. And the first thing out of your mouth, right, is the reaction. I am looking for a job. I'm doing the best I can. I've done all this stuff. I put applications out. And then the next thing you know is that she comes back at you and starts yelling at you. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you arguing with me? And it heats up, right? That's what happens because you got triggered because the thing that was on your mind was that you just want a job and you were feeling very insecure to some degree because we all do when we go through this phase, as well as our self-value and our self-worth we begin to question because of our job, because it seems like this world is so centered in jobs and career and money and monetary income that's going through your head. So that's kind of the trigger, right? So when somebody uses something that triggers you, it's something that's been on your mind. It's also something that you've probably been judging yourself about, right? Something you don't feel very good about. And so that's how people can trigger us to react in an argument, right? So, you know, the only way to deal with that particular example is when you walk in is you have to be very cognitive of what's happening and keep calm. And sometimes that can be very difficult, but practice makes perfect. One of the things that I want you to realize though is with a trigger, okay, when we react, it shows that we've taken something personal, okay? We've accepted it. We've also become the other person's supply. Okay, because we're giving them this power and this energy. So we become their supply, which is very interesting because they're getting what they want. Because not only are we arguing back with them, we're kind of affirming what they're saying, but we're also giving them the attention that they want. Okay, so I want you to really think about that. Because when you're giving somebody everything they want, they're going to continue to spike it up. They're going to continue to wrench up the argument. They're also getting you to react to them, okay? And they like that because they feel like you're a little out of control. They like pushing you kind of over the edge. It makes them feel good. So each time you react, I want you to realize you're actually giving them that supply, and that's not what we want to be doing. We want to be pulling back and keeping our energy for ourselves. I want you to also realize one thing, is that when we react to them, we're validating to some degree what they're saying. We're validating. We're accepting what they're saying of us, and we're ultimately owning it, okay? And so I know that a lot of you have been in relationships where there are massive amounts of verbal argumentations all the time, okay? And you end up, it's so hard to keep it together because you don't know what's going to happen. You're already walking on eggshells, and the next thing you know, they say something to you that completely triggers you, right? It's hard, but I want you to realize that a lot of times these arguments are directed because they're trying to get you off target from the real conversation. Haven't you tried to have a conversation with somebody that continues to start verbal arguments where you're asking them a specific question, but they start getting angry, and then they turn it around, and the next thing you know, they trigger you, or they gaslight you, or they manipulate you, and then the next thing you know, you're arguing, you're yelling, you're screaming, now you're on their level, and later on, you can never get back to the original subject matter because they're showing you what a bad person you are, what a horrible person you are, how you're so angry and mean and screaming and yelling, and look at you, look at you, look at your face, look how you're acting. And all of a sudden it becomes about you being the bad person and you're not getting the answers to the questions that you asked that started this chaos in the first place. And this right here that we're talking about in that situation is a diversion. It's a diversion tactic. I'm diverting you from the real subject matter of what you want to talk about. So if you're asking me a question and I don't want to answer that question and I start wrenching it up and then I trigger you and I get you reacting to what I triggered you to, we're no longer talking about what I don't want to talk about anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? The elephant in the room, whatever that was that I didn't want to answer the question of. And this happens more often than not. And that's what I want you to think about, because nothing gets rectified if you lose your cool, because you'll ultimately take the blame for the argumentation, because they're not going to take their blame for the argument. And also, when you rinse it up, you're actually allowing it, and you're saying that this is acceptable around me. Okay, when we rinse it up, we go, okay, yeah, we're in this. It's almost like taking a handshake. As they rinse it up, and you go, okay, yeah, I'm going to agree to this, and I'm going to rinse it up. Okay, and that's what's happening. Because remember, it takes two to tango. If you're looking at this person like they're crazy, and you're quiet, and 20 minutes later you say, hey, are you done? It changes the whole dynamic. All of a sudden, you're not owning it anymore, and you're not affirming their response, and you're not affirming their stance. See, what happens here is that when somebody, for example, let's say that they take something out on you, that's not direct, it's not about you at all, and they're taking their anger and resentments out on you. When you rinse it up, it's basically saying to them that, hey, what I did was okay, I'm justified in what I did. See, look at what a bad person Ashley is right here in this argument. You know what? It was completely directed properly. Okay? When you don't accept it, and you don't rinse it up, and you don't go to their level, and you don't react, it makes them have to question later on their motives. Okay? Because it makes them have to look at themselves. And I want you to really think about this, because this is really deep. People need to learn certain lessons in their life sometimes, right? And they're not going to learn it if you rinse it up with them. They're not going to learn it if they don't see a difference between you and them. Okay? Think about it. If there's something that they need to understand and see, that I'm not part of the problem, I'm actually part of the solution, but if I'm arguing and fighting and screaming and yelling too, I look like I'm part of the problem. I look like it's okay that they direct that anger to me. But if that's not what I'm agreeing to, and I'm not becoming their supply, and I'm not in agreement doing that handshake on this argument, that's not true. And you know, when people talk about taking the higher ground, it sounds so rosy and colorful. It's like, how do they take the higher ground when somebody's trying to trigger me? This is what we're talking about, but I want you to understand what the higher ground means, okay? Because I think we talk about this in like a lofty Zen type thing, which it is kind of Zen in a way, because it is almost like a Buddha master type way of dealing with argumentation, but we need to understand why that is, okay? So let me go through 5 little things about why that is, so that you can completely understand the anatomy of the verbal argument and how to stay clear of these arguments, and eventually be able to have that person hopefully look within themselves to understand why they started the argument in the first place, and not become, well, collateral damage, as well as not be the one that gets blamed. The first way to begin to take the higher ground, and this is a big one, is I don't want you to take things personally. No matter how triggered you are, I want you to realize that most people's arguments are directly related to them. It is directed toward them. You just happen to be the person standing across from them. Okay? Now think about that. If somebody starts an argument with you, and you're standing there, and they're talking to you, and they've increased their volume, and if something triggers you, you feel immediately this has something to do with you, right? And then you take it on. But instead, if you kind of sit back and analyze and say, okay, I might be triggered, but this is really not about me, I want you to be able to stay in that place. Because if you can, you won't be triggered to own it, okay? So the second thing is I want you to do is not trigger to own it, not allow yourself to own this argument, okay? Because many times when people are arguing, it's an internal thing within themselves, right? It might be directed to you, but it might not necessarily be about you. It just feels like it's about us, right? And they could be trying to manipulate and gaslight us as well, but why would we allow somebody to manipulate us into reacting? Okay, because again, to me, that shows that we're weak. And I'm not saying that we're weak, I'm just saying we don't want to appear weak, but also when we do allow someone to elicit that from us and to trigger us, it's not a good feeling, right? A lot of us, though, however, have been brought up to fight, okay? We were brought up in a family dynamic where you were supposed to fight, you were supposed to get respect, and no matter what you had to do to get respect, you had to fight, you had to push your argument, you had to yell and scream to get heard. But I'm telling you, all that, it doesn't feel good, right? And all that doesn't work. The more and more you yell to get heard in an argument, the more the other person's going to yell over you. And if they don't yell over you, even though they started it, they'll turn it around on you, they'll get quiet, and then they'll look at you like you're the fool. Okay, so we don't want them to win on this. We don't want to be triggered by this. We just want to stand back and analyze. So taking that emotional step back, okay? The third thing I want you to do is to stay calm. Stay calm, listen and analyze, taking some deep breaths in and out. Anything that's triggering you, I want you to be aware that the trigger is triggering you because it's inside your own head. So this is actual personal information that you need to know. Okay, so let me explain that real quick. If you're triggered by someone else and what they say, instead of fighting it, start analyzing it. Why am I triggered by that? What is within my own mind that's making me get emotionally vested in this conversation, okay? Because I want you to think about this. This is a big self-discovery piece. So while they're talking, you can listen, you can analyze, and also you can say, that did trigger me. I probably need to think about this later on and maybe journal about this because there's something in that upsets me. And there's something in there that's real that I feel about myself, right? Because I want you to see, if you can actually slow down the argument and not get involved, you can learn a lot of things about yourself. You can also learn a lot of things about the other person, how they may use gaslighting or manipulate you. You can also learn a little why they want to argue, and you can also see more of their intention when you step back as well. So just stay, you don't have to defend yourself verbally, you can just listen. So remember, when we're listening, we're not in acceptance. It's only when we react and get involved that we sign off and agree to the argument. The fourth thing that I want to remind you about is a lot of times these arguments are started by somebody because they're trying to derail us from the real conversation. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. But when you ask a question or you want to know an answer, or you're asking them what they were doing or whatever, a question that they obviously don't want to answer, sometimes they can trigger you, gaslight, manipulate you to gloss over what was going on over there, manipulate you, get you to react, then sidetrack you, right? Then point out how you're being the mean person, you're being the angry person, you're being the out of control crazy person, and then eventually nothing's solved. Okay, so the original question you have, you usually forget, right? Because you're under so much duress and stress, you forget about it. And nothing's solved, it's never answered, there are no answers, and then what happens is that person continues to use that ammunition on you about how you're the bad person, you're the person that's getting crazy, you're the person that's arguing, and you need to calm down. Okay, and so I want you to think about that, because why let them turn the tables on you if you're just listening to them and you're catching the nuances? Not only do you see how they're trying to manipulate you, but you don't get pulled into it and you don't become their supply. And the last one, number 5, I want you to begin to care about your heart, your mind, your body, your soul, all that, because when we get into an argument that really increases our stress level, we're not doing our body good. We're not doing our body justice. We're not helping ourselves in any way. We're hurting ourselves. So why would we allow somebody to get us all jacked up and all stressed out, right? I really want you to think about that, because you deserve better than that. And if you seem to find yourself in arguments with this person triggering you constantly, you probably need to really kind of think about this relationship you're in, right? But also, you need to step back and start analyzing, why is it triggering me? What are the thoughts in my head that I can work on so that I'm not triggered, but also not playing into what they want to play into? Because if you give them what they want, it's as though you've accepted this argument and you've taken this on, okay, and you're allowing this to be, which is not true. When somebody does start a fight kind of out of the blue, it might take you off guard, and that's some of the most challenging things to deal with, is that if somebody does try to fight with you and you're not expecting it, right? And I understand that. But as you can calm yourself down, even if you find yourself reacting just because out of fear, or reacting because they take you off target, just try to recompose yourself. Just try to take a step back and compose yourself and calm down and just start breathing, okay? Just breathing in and out. And as you're breathing in and out, you don't have to listen. You can listen to them, but at the same time, analyzing what's really happening, step back, and then you can actually come up with a conversation at the end that's, if you're done, I'm done, and get out of that conversation. Because I know it can be hard if you're not expecting it and it hasn't been building up and somebody just kind of verbally attacks you. It can be really challenging to deal with. But again, all these arguments give us a chance to practice. Okay, and I know that sounds weird too. This is the last nugget of information today, okay? When we get in an argument, we usually see this as a painful situation, but it's not. It's actually a way of us being able to groom ourselves and really school ourselves on how to deal with this. And each time we get a chance to do it, and it's not fun, I get it, but we can look at it as a learning tool and understand what we did and kind of analyze that. Okay, so I got triggered that time, but I pulled out and I realized what I did. Or this time I didn't get triggered and I was listening, and now I realize that that is part of the broken record in my mind. Different levels of self-awareness is where we're going with this. So don't always look at it as a horrible situation that took place. As it's happening, if you can just subtly change that perspective from horrible to learning experience, it could be a little more interesting. And I think in that situation, it's going to seem more like a lab, like you're actually in a laboratory experimenting something instead of being in the argument. And that can help us too, to have that emotional distance. I hope this video has helped you. And if you've done something lately to stop the trigger when you're in a full-on verbal argument, what was the mindset that you had? What was the thought that came into mind that really helped you to get back on target and not fight? I'm interested. Please put that in the comment section below. And if you've used any of these techniques as well, how it's worked for you. Okay, don't forget to live your true life.